The message arrived without ceremony, without diplomacy, without ambiguity. On a quiet afternoon in Lomé, Togo's government received a warning from one of the most isolated states on Earth, North Korea. The content was direct. Any support, silence, or facilitation of forces threatening Ibrahim Traoré's government in Burkina Faso would be interpreted as participation in a coordinated destabilization campaign. And Pyongyang would not remain neutral. This wasn't ideological solidarity. This was deterrent signaling at its most calculated. For weeks, whispers had circulated across West Africa. A coup was forming. Not openly, not loudly, but through encrypted channels, quiet meetings in coastal capitals, and carefully worded communiques from foreign intermediaries. Burkina Faso, under Traoré's leadership since the September 2022 takeover, had become a fulcrum of regional tension. His refusal to bow to ECOWAS pressure, his pivot away from France, and his growing alignment with Mali and Niger under military rule had made him target. And Togo, with its strategic coastline and historical ties to Western intelligence networks, was rumored to be playing a quiet but crucial role, offering logistical corridors, diplomatic cover, and a base for coordination. Then came Pyongyang's intervention. Unexpected, unprecedented, and devastatingly effective. North Korea has no military presence in West Africa. It has limited economic influence. Yet what it does have is experience in one domain few nations understand as intimately: survival under siege. Pyongyang knows what it means to be encircled, sanctioned, and targeted for regime change. It recognizes the language of soft coups, proxy pressure, and internationalized intervention. And in this case, it chose to speak that language back, publicly, bluntly, and with geopolitical weight. The warning reframed everything. What had been whispered about as a domestic power struggle was now being described in Pyongyang's terms as a regional security threat, one that involved external coordination, international facilitation, and deliberate destabilization. By naming Togo explicitly, North Korea elevated the stakes. It wasn't just Traore who was watching. Mali was watching, Niger was watching, Russia was watching, and suddenly, Lomé's room for maneuvering shrank dramatically. This is where the psychology of deterrence becomes critical. Togo is not a military powerhouse. It does not seek confrontation with major powers, but it does value its regional positioning, its ability to play both sides, to maintain access to Western partners while avoiding the kind of isolation that has crippled neighbors. Pyongyang's message threatened that balance. It suggested that neutrality would no longer be enough, that silence could be read as complicity, that inaction might carry consequences not from Ouagadougou alone, but from a broader network of states now invested in Traoré's survival. For the plotters, the impact was immediate. Confidence requires discretion. Coups depend on plausible deniability, on the ability to move in shadows until the moment of execution. But North Korea's statement stripped away that cover. It internationalized the conspiracy. It named the mechanism. It turned a regional maneuver into a geopolitical flashpoint. And in doing so, it introduced uncertainty into every subsequent calculation. Who else was watching? Who else had intelligence? How deep did the counter-network go? The warning also carried a subtler message. Traore was not alone. Whether through ideological affinity, strategic interest, or simple opposition to Western-led regime change, he had backing that extended far beyond the Sahel. That backing might not involve troops or weapon shipments, but involved something equally valuable in the fragile arithmetic of coups, legitimacy, visibility, and the threat of escalation. They had safe houses, encrypted communication lines, layered command cells, and a plan to take down an entire government in a single night. When Burkina Faso's security apparatus rolled up the Coup network in early 2025, what they uncovered wasn't a rogue military faction or a spontaneous mutiny. It was a professionally structured insurgent operation, years in the making, designed to decapitate the state before dawn. This was not improvisation. This was architecture. The blueprint was methodical. Strike simultaneously at media outlets, telecommunications hubs, and key security installations across Ouagadougou. Create information blackout. Sever command and control. Isolate the presidential guard. By the time the sun rose, Ibrahim Traoré's government would be gone, replaced by a transitional authority already scripted, already recognized by select regional actors, already framed as a restoration of order. The operation had a timeline measured in hours, and it nearly had the resources to execute it. Intelligence assessments conducted after the arrests revealed a network that operated with a discipline uncommon in West African coup attempts. Command was compartmentalized. Operatives in one cell had no knowledge of others. Communication protocols used rotating encryption keys, and burner devices cycled every 72 hours. Financing flowed through offshore accounts, informal remittance channels, and front companies registered in coastal capitals far from Ouagadougou. This was not the product of disgruntled officers meeting in barracks. This was externally facilitated, internally embedded, and strategically patient. What's critical here is the timing. The plotters weren't waiting for a political opening or a moment of weakness. They were engineering one. The plan relied on simultaneity, hitting multiple nodes at once to prevent coordinated response. Media silence would delay public awareness. Communications disruption would paralyze loyal units. And by the time clarity emerged, the fait accompli would already be international news, with foreign governments urged to accept the transition in the name of stability. But coups of this complexity carry a vulnerability. They require preparation, and preparation leaves traces. Burkinabe counterintelligence had been tracking anomalies for months. Unexplained movements of mid-ranking officers, sudden influxes of cash into accounts with no clear income source, encrypted traffic patterns that spiked during politically sensitive periods. The network believed it was operating in shadows. In reality, it was being mapped in real time. When the decision was made to move, the arrests didn't come all at once. They came in sequence, carefully choreographed to avoid tipping off remaining cells while extracting maximum intelligence from each detention. This is where exposure becomes a weapon. Rather than announce a sweeping crackdown, authorities dismantled the network piece by piece, publicly revealing just enough to signal that the conspiracy was known, penetrated, and collapsing. Safe houses were raided. Communication hubs went silent. Financiers found their accounts frozen. And within days, what had been a coordinated operation became a scattered collection of isolated actors with no way to regroup, no way to communicate, and no certainty about who had been compromised. The strategic exposure also served another purpose. It demonstrated to external backers that their investment had failed. Coup financing is a high-risk venture. It depends on plausible deniability, on the ability to disavow involvement if the operation collapses. But once the network's structure became public knowledge, once names, accounts, and communication methods were laid bare, deniability evaporated. And with it, the willingness to reinvest. What separates this from typical African coup attempts is the level of external sophistication involved. The model resembled operations seen in hybrid warfare contexts, Ukraine, Syria, Libya, where coups are not just military events, but informational, financial, and psychological campaigns designed to create the appearance of inevitability. The goal isn't just to seize power, it's to make resistance seem futile, to convince the population and the international community that the transition is already complete before the first shot is fired. But in Burkina Faso, that illusion never materialized. The network was neutralized before it could act. And in the weeks that followed, the very existence of such a structured plot became a narrative tool in Traoré's hands, a validation of his warnings about foreign interference, a justification for closer alignment with allies who opposed Western intervention, and a deterrent to future attempts. The coup network inside Burkina Faso was collapsing. Arrests were underway. Communication lines had gone dark. Safe houses were compromised. But in the encrypted channels still functioning, in the final conversations between operatives and their external contacts, one question dominated. Would the region give them oxygen? Because coups don't just need weapons and coordination. They need legitimacy. They need the belief that if they succeed, someone will recognize them. Someone will offer protection. Someone will ensure that what begins as a seizure of power doesn't end in total isolation. And in early 2025, as Ibrahim Traoré's security apparatus dismantled the conspiracy piece by piece, the plotters weren't just watching Ouagadougou. They were watching Lomé, Abidjan, Accra, and Dakar. This is where geopolitics becomes oxygen, or suffocation. Regional actors in West Africa have long played a delicate game when it comes to military takeovers. Publicly, ECOWAS condemns coups, imposes sanctions, demands transitions to civilian rule. But privately, the calculations are far more complex. Some governments see instability in a neighbor as an opportunity to expand influence. Others view certain military leaders as preferable to the alternatives. And still others offer quiet cooperation, intelligence sharing, logistical corridors, diplomatic cover, not out of ideological alignment, but out of strategic necessity or external pressure. For the conspirators in Burkina Faso, survival depended on reading these signals correctly. If Togo remained silent, that could be interpreted as tacit support. If Côte d'Ivoire maintained normal diplomatic relations without condemning the plot, that could signal future recognition. If Ghana allowed certain movements across its borders without scrutiny, that could provide the infrastructure needed to regroup. The coup didn't need overt backing. It needed ambiguity. It needed the possibility of acceptance. But ambiguity cuts both ways. And in this case, regional uncertainty became a weapon against the plotters. What Traoré's government understood, and what North Korea's warning to Togo reinforced, was that the conspiracy's collapse could be accelerated by eliminating any hope of external refuge. This meant turning regional capitals into decision points. Would they signal openness to a post-Traoré transition, even indirectly? Or would they make clear that any new government emerging from a coup would face immediate isolation, sanctions, and potential military pressure from the alliance of Sahel states? The fear of giving oxygen became a diplomatic tool. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had already demonstrated their willingness to act collectively against perceived threats. They had withdrawn from ECOWAS. They had expelled French forces. They had built security partnerships with Russia and explored ties with Iran, Turkey, and yes, North Korea. This was not a fragmented region where a coup could succeed through divide-and-conquer tactics. This was a bloc with shared threat perceptions, integrated intelligence, and a mutual interest in preventing externally facilitated regime change. For coastal West African states, this created a dilemma. Supporting the plotters, even passively, risked confrontation not just with Ouagadougou, but with Bamako and Niamey as well. It risked being labeled as a staging ground for destabilization. It risked the kind of reputational damage that comes from backing a failed coup, especially one that was publicly exposed as externally coordinated. And perhaps most critically, it risked becoming a target for the same hybrid countermeasures that had just dismantled the conspiracy inside Burkina Faso. So the silence that followed was not neutral. It was strategic. Togo did not issue statements of support. Côte d'Ivoire did not open channels for negotiation. Ghana maintained border vigilance. And one by one, the plotters' fallback options disappeared. The regional maneuvering they had counted on never materialized. The diplomatic cover they had expected never arrived. And without that external oxygen, the network couldn't breathe. This is where the stakes become clear. Coups in the Sahel are no longer isolated events. They are regional stress tests. They reveal who is willing to intervene, who is willing to stay neutral, and who is willing to actively shut the door. And in 2025, the door closed faster than the plotters anticipated. The coup failed before the first shot was fired. Not because the plotters lacked weapons, not because they were outnumbered, but because by the time they were ready to move, they no longer believed they could win. In the cold arithmetic of regime change, belief is everything. Coups succeed when conspirators are confident that the state is vulnerable, that their network is secure, and that the international community will either support them or stay neutral long enough for the fait accompli to solidify. strip away that confidence, and even the most meticulously planned operation becomes a gamble no one wants to take. And in Burkina Faso, in early 2025, confidence was systematically destroyed. The first crack came from within. As Burkinabe intelligence began rolling up the network, they didn't simply arrest everyone at once. They calibrated the exposure. A safe house raided here. A financial account frozen there. Just enough information released to signal that the conspiracy was penetrated, that the state knew more than the plotters assumed, and that operational security, once considered airtight, had been fatally compromised. For conspirators operating in compartmentalized cells, this created paranoia. Who had talked? How deep did the infiltration go? Were communications still secure, or had they been monitored for months? This is psychological warfare at its most effective. The plotters didn't know what the government knew. They didn't know who was still loyal and who had been turned. And in that fog of uncertainty, the timeline they had spent years building began to fracture. Timing in a coup is non-negotiable. You move when the pieces are in place, when coordination is guaranteed, when momentum is on your side. But once doubt enters the equation, once operatives start questioning whether their counterparts are still in position or whether the next communication will be their last, the operation stalls. And a stalled coup is a failed coup. But internal exposure alone doesn't explain why the network collapsed so completely. What sealed its fate was the external signaling that destroyed any hope of regional or international backing. This is where North Korea's warning to Togo becomes critical. On its face, Pyongyang has no direct strategic interest in Burkina Faso. It has no troops in the region, no significant economic ties, no historical alliance with Ibrahim Traoré. Yet by issuing a public, unambiguous statement that any facilitation of the coup would be viewed as participation in a broader destabilization campaign, North Korea accomplished something far more valuable than military support. It shattered the illusion of plausible deniability. Coups thrive in ambiguity. They depend on regional actors maintaining just enough distance to avoid accountability, while offering just enough support, logistical, diplomatic, or financial, to keep the operation viable. But Pyongyang's intervention eliminated that middle ground. It forced regional governments to choose. And by framing the conspiracy as an international destabilization project rather than a domestic power struggle, it raised the stakes for anyone considering involvement. The plotters were watching. So were their external backers. And what they saw was not just a warning from North Korea, but a signal that Traoré's survival had become a priority for actors willing to intervene diplomatically, publicly, and without hesitation. That signal didn't need to come with troops or weapons. It just needed to introduce enough uncertainty to make continued investment in the coup seem riskier than abandoning it. This is the modern logic of deterrence. You don't need to defeat an enemy on the battlefield if you can convince them the battlefield has already shifted. Intelligence leaks create internal doubt. Diplomatic warnings create external hesitation. And together, they reframe the entire operation from a calculated risk into a probable failure. What's remarkable here is how little kinetic force was actually required. There were no mass deployments, no bloody crackdowns, no dramatic standoffs in the streets of Ouagadougou. The coup died quietly, in encrypted chat rooms and hastily abandoned safe houses, because the conditions that make coups viable, secrecy, confidence, and external support, had been methodically dismantled. This is the lesson reverberating across the Sahel. Stability in this region is no longer just about military strength or popular legitimacy. It's about intelligence capacity, strategic signaling, and the ability to manage perception in real time. Traoré didn't just survive a coup attempt. He demonstrated a model for defeating one without ever engaging it directly. The question now is whether this model is replicable or whether it worked in Burkina Faso because of a unique combination of intelligence penetration, regional alignment, and external deterrence that may not exist elsewhere. Because if other governments in the Sahel can adopt this playbook, the era of opportunistic coups may be ending. But if they can't, then the next conspiracy will simply adjust, learning from this failure and adapting to a landscape where perception, not firepower, decides who rules.